Hello and welcome to one of my Excel videos. Today I will talk about Excel pivot table automation on one of the samples that we're looking at now. And what you're looking at here is just one tiny little pivot table I'm using to be able to illustrate this example. And the data set, the data source of this pivot table is on the other tab called data. So the idea is the automation of updating the pivot tables, and basically what motivated me was assuming that you're doing a lot of reporting as part of your data analysis work. And on this, for example, you have lots of reports, lots of different pivot tables with lots of different data sources, and they need to be updated frequently, maybe daily, maybe weekly. So if that's the case, it will be a lot of pain to go back into through the settings of a pivot table like this, and going into the range settings and change the range, the row and column manually for each one of those data sets that are feeding the pivot tables, which in turn eventually updates the reports. So let's start with this example here. Currently the total for sum of gross sales total is $421,600, and again it is pulling the numbers data from the source. So let's say we have a new data set came, and this time it is less. Just delete this portion of it. Assume that this is the new data set. Again, the same number of columns would be different, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep the number of columns same, except I'm going to change the rows. So this is the new data set. Now, if I go back to pivot table, if I want to reflect this, I want to get the new sum of gross sales before running the pivot table. If I do run that, look what's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and run it, refresh it, and it's going to show it like this. And I want to go back to data source, and data source is going to be showing still the same range. And as you notice that half of it, this portion, is blank because the data range is not changed automatically. Yes, I changed the range, the data range, the new data range, and this is reflected in the total. Yet if you see, it's basically Excel is adding a blank field in a pivot table. And if you have this situation for the pivot tables that are feeding the properly set and nicely formatted PDF reports, and it's not going to be accepted by the management. So what you need to do is you need to basically reflect the new data range in this pivot table. So I'm going to go back and actually once, just to kind of to show you, click on this button here, update pivot table, and your pivot table is now updated. It says, the message says, and now the same result, the result is the same, it was correct, but now the format is good too. It is supposed to have this accepted format of pivot table without blanks, which in turn properly update the PDF reports. So let's go back and take a look at the what's running behind this button. So I'm going to go into assign macro and go into edit mode. Right now what we're looking at here is the sub procedure called update pivot table range sub procedure. So it basically created a bunch of variables here, and each of these variables were used in the code beneath here. So beneath the variables. Example here, the data sheet and pivot sheet. See, these are the actual variables created here in the declaration of variables section. And data sheet is set equal to this workbook.worksheets. It's called data, this is the tab name, and the other one same for pivot sheet, and it's pivot name pivot. So, and also the other objects created here, the variables like data range, pivot name, new range, last column, and last row. And the rest of the code takes care of that, and eventually ultimately, you know, there's a message box saying the new pivot table is now updated. So going back to again this the pivot tab, and I want to go back and add this time new data range. I want to basically modify the range, and I will add, I'll make it a little bigger. So as you see, as I do this, go back to pivot table again, and going into the pivot table settings, change the data source, and going back to this, you notice that the range is still the old range. It's not going to be changed, you know, obviously automatically, because the new data came in, and it is still seeing the old data range. What would happen if I just update without using the running the VBA? If I simply refresh the pivot table, I'm going to go ahead and try that, and look at this. It's not changing, right? It is not changing because it's not seeing that range. What's seeing there is, go back to again data range. I'm sorry. Going back to again change source. It is still seeing the same range, and because of that, it is not going to reflect the new data, which is down here, row number 19. So in this case, look at this. I'm going to click on update pivot tables, and now look at the total. It was 18,000 or 180,000, something like that. Now it is 566,880. And let's go ahead and take a look at the source data. There you go. The data range has been changed from the original, from the previous range to the current range, basically accommodating the new data set that came maybe through some large databases at the back end and feeding into the Excel files. This is a kind of a typical work where, as a data analyst and working as in business intelligence community, to generate and produce reports for management. And typically type of reports like these might be overwhelming. The amount of complexity and amount of volume would be overwhelming. So in this kind of environment, to be able to, first off, you know, to make your own life easier, to be more productive and efficient, you need this kind of obviously this kind of functionality, and automation comes super handy. So that's what I just wanted to share with the people, with folks, you know, who are working in similar platforms and environments like I do as a business intelligence analyst or data analyst kind of environment. Well, I appreciate for you watching my video, and more videos I'll be adding to my repertoire. So thank you very much, and see you later. Bye bye.